Please, not him. Her whispered plea cut through the freezing night. One look into her terrified eyes, and Rafael Voss knew everything he thought he'd left behind had returned. And it wasn't just her. She was carrying a secret that could destroy everything. Tonight, the past, the Mafia, and a hidden life collide, and only one choice will decide who survives. Welcome back to Heartwoven Tales. I'm Selena, and I hope you're doing wonderfully today. I'd love to know, where are you listening to me from? Make sure you stay with me till the very end because this story is going to touch your heart in ways you won't forget. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and let's dive right in. Rafael Voss's car sliced through the black night, its headlights piercing the frost-laden street like a blade. Snow swirled around the city in chaotic spirals, clinging to his tailored jacket and the leather steering wheel. But he felt nothing of the cold. Nothing had ever touched him like the vision ahead, frozen in place at the bus stop. The figure was slumped against the bench, a fragile silhouette bent under the weight of some invisible burden. At first glance, Rafael thought it was a homeless woman, one more shadow swallowed by the cruel winter, a life unnoticed. But then she lifted her head. Ayla. The name hit his mind like a thunderclap, making his chest tighten. He almost pressed the accelerator harder, almost drove past. It would have been easier, safer, cleaner, but he couldn't. Not tonight. Not when the universe had cruelly thrown the one person he thought he'd lost forever, directly in his path. Her eyes, once familiar, now haunting, met his. They were wide, a storm of dread and fear mixed with something else, something he couldn't immediately name. Regret? Relief? Or maybe the fragile hope that he might not recognize her entirely. Her hand instinctively cradled her belly, pressing against it as if sheer will could shield her from the cold, and from whatever danger had been stalking her this long, silent year. Rafael's pulse thundered in his ears. The city around him faded into a blur, leaving only the two of them standing on that deserted street. He opened the car door, the chill of the night biting through his coat, and felt a rare hesitation. Every instinct he had screamed at him to drive away, to ignore the past that had cost him too much. But the moment her gaze locked with his, that instinct shattered like glass. Ayla didn't move, not a step, not a twitch. She looked as though the years of fear, of running, of hiding, had carved her into something unrecognizable. Yet every detail screamed the truth he couldn't ignore. Her hair, matted and frozen at the tips, framed her face with a softness that defied the brutality of the winter. Her lips, pale and trembling, barely moved when she whispered, "Please, not him." Rafael froze. Those words weren't spoken to him. They were meant for the darkness behind him, the unseen eyes that might be tracking her movements even now. His chest tightened. The thought that she feared him, or more terrifyingly, feared what being found by him might bring, squeezed every rational thought out of his mind. Snowflakes clung to his eyelashes as he stepped closer, boots crunching against the ice-crusted ground. Each step was deliberate, cautious, as though approaching a fragile creature that could shatter at any moment. The wind howled around them, carrying with it a sound almost like whispers, almost like warnings. "Rafael," she muttered again, not looking directly at him, her gaze shifting to the empty street as if expecting some invisible predator to emerge. Her voice was a broken thread, fragile and full of hesitation, and it wounded him in ways no bullet ever could. He noticed how thin her arms had become, how pale her skin looked against the cold night, yet her belly, prominent, undeniable, marked the proof of a secret he wasn't yet ready to face. Anger, confusion, and something warmer, a dangerous thread of longing warred inside him. The bus stop sign creaked above them, swaying in the wind. Each metallic groan sounded like a signal, a subtle drumbeat to the tension already thick between them. Rafael's eyes scanned the empty street beyond, searching for shadows, for threats, for any hint of the danger she might be fleeing. Her hand never left her belly. Her body shivered, not entirely from the cold, he realized, but from fear. Fear of him. Fear of what he would do. Fear of what the world might do to them both if the wrong people discovered her. He took another step, closer, and the crunch of his boots against the snow seemed deafening in the silent night. She flinched slightly, not at him, but at the possibility that someone might be behind him, waiting for the exact moment to strike. His hands twitched, wanting to reach out, to pull her into the warmth of the car, to tell her it was safe. But he didn't know the rules anymore. The old rules. The rules that had kept him alive, untouchable, feared, felt useless in the presence of her fragile, trembling form. Her eyes flicked to him again, desperate, pleading, and he felt the old, familiar ache return. The ache of being denied, of missing out on the life he had believed he would never get back. And now it was here, standing in front of him, and he had no idea what to do with it. The wind tugged at her coat, at her hair, at the very air around them, carrying the bitter scent of snow, ice, and danger. Rafael's hand instinctively went to the door handle, then paused. Every muscle in his body screamed at him, stay calm, stay rational, or risk everything. But calm had never been his way. Rationality had always been a luxury he couldn't afford. Love, messy, dangerous, unavoidable, had never been in his plans. Yet here she was, and there was no escaping it. Her whisper came again, this time almost inaudible over the wind. I can't let you find me. The weight of those words pressed against him harder than any threat ever could. She wasn't running from the world. She was running because of him, because of what being with him might cost them both. He wanted to argue, to demand an explanation, to reclaim the year lost. But he didn't. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step forward, bridging the space between them, trying to communicate with eyes alone what words could not capture. Her lips quivered. Her hands tightened over her belly, and then a shadow flickered across the street, subtle and fleeting, yet enough to make Rafael's heart jump. Someone was watching. Or maybe it was just his imagination, heightened by the tension of seeing her again. Her eyes followed the movement, sharp and alert, pupils dilated with a fear he hadn't seen in her before. He felt the pulse of panic radiating off her, small but intense, like a warning bell he couldn't ignore. He wanted to speak, to reassure, to command, but no sound came out. The night held him. The cold held her, and the unknown waited for them both. The car's heater, the warmth of the engine, the safety of his territory, all of it felt distant, meaningless. Here, on this frozen street, nothing mattered except the fragile, trembling woman before him. Ayla's gaze returned to him, flickering between pleading and defiance, and Rafael realized something terrifying. She had survived a year without him, but tonight, survival might not be enough. The air between them thickened. Every breath, every whisper of snow, every heartbeat felt amplified, a drumbeat of tension and fear. Rafael could sense the danger she feared but wouldn't name. He reached out, slow, careful, hand hovering just above hers, not touching, not yet. A test, a gesture, a question without words. She flinched, not away, not back, but as if the very act of being near him might summon disaster. Rafael, she breathed, voice trembling, carrying the weight of secrets and silence, carrying the weight of the unborn child, carrying the weight of a year he had lost. He felt the pull of inevitability. He couldn't turn away now. He couldn't ignore her. Not when everything he had built, everything he had become, suddenly seemed meaningless in the shadow of this moment. The bus stop's flickering light threw long shadows across the snow, highlighting the small tremors that ran through her body, the subtle panic that ran like ice through his veins. He wanted answers, needed them, but he also feared them. Whatever truth she carried could destroy the fragile balance he had maintained in his world, and yet he could not leave. And as another shadow moved, distant, deliberate, he realized they were not alone tonight. Ayla's whispered plea, please, not him, hung in the air, more dangerous than any gun, more powerful than any threat. Rafael stepped fully out of the car, wind biting through him, resolve hardening like steel. He would face whatever came next, whatever threat lingered, whatever secret had kept her away, because he wouldn't, let her face it alone. And yet, as the snow swirled and the night pressed in, Rafael knew the world outside that small pool of light was waiting to test them both. He didn't move forward and he didn't retreat. He simply stood, watching, waiting, and understanding for the first time that the past he thought he had left behind had come back to claim them both. The night held its breath, and so did he. The faint sound of approaching tires on icy asphalt reminded him sharply someone or something was out there, watching, waiting, ready. Rafael's jaw tightened. He could feel the danger before he could see it. He could sense the collision of past, present, and future about to explode. Ayla's hand remained on her belly, trembling, guarding, pleading, and he realized, cold as the winter around them, that nothing could have prepared him for this reunion. The world had narrowed to the two of them, to her fear, to the secret she carried, to the shadowed streets beyond. He swallowed hard, heart racing, mind sharpening. With instinct, one step, one move, and everything would change. And in that frozen moment, Rafael Voss understood. He should have driven away, but he couldn't. The night had other plans, and so did she. The wind howled, the snow fell harder, and somewhere, beyond the dim streetlights, something or someone watched. And that was when he realized nothing would ever be simple again. And then a dark silhouette emerged from the shadows, moving with impossible speed toward them, and Rafael's instinct screamed danger like never before. The moment the dark silhouette surged from the shadows, Rafael's body reacted before his mind could catch up. Every muscle coiled like a predator ready to strike. An instinct propelled him toward Ayla with a force that ignored the burning chill of the blizzard. The passenger door swung open violently against the wind as he reached for her, his hands steady, firm, but gentle enough not to hurt her, yet her body flinched like a fragile bird caught in a storm. "Get in!" he demanded, voice low but sharp, carrying the kind of authority that brooked no argument. She shook her head violently, a desperation etched so clearly across her features that it made his chest constrict. A sharp ache that wasn't just fear, but something deeper, something primal. She held her stomach protectively, clutching her belly as if sheer will could prevent the danger surrounding them from reaching the small life she carried. "Someone else will come," she whispered, barely audible over the howling wind, her voice trembling as much from terror as from the bitter cold that bit at her exposed face. Rafael stepped closer, boots crunching in the snow, and he realized that her eyes were no longer bracing for his temper, his judgment, or his wrath. They were bracing for something far more insidious, a shadowy threat that she expected to leap from the darkness the instant she lowered her guard. The snow stung her cheeks, painting them a shade of blue that mirrored the icy tension hanging thick in the air. Yet she still refused, and Rafael understood that her refusal was not obstinance. It was terror carved into the marrow of her bones. He gripped her arm, steady but insistent, feeling the tremor run through her as if his touch could awaken memories or images that she didn't dare face. Her lips parted like she wanted to warn him, to speak a message he wasn't prepared to hear, but the words fractured in the air, broken into a whisper that carried both dread and warning. "It's not safe." And the moment he finally managed to pull her into the warmth of the car, into the sanctuary of its heated interior, her eyes darted toward the street behind them, scanning shadows with a sharpness born of years spent fleeing invisible predators. Fear sharpening her expression as though someone, or something, could materialize from the darkness at any second. Raphael's gaze followed hers, understanding at last the truth he had only begun to grasp. She wasn't afraid of being with him. She was afraid of being found because of him. He shut the door with a decisive click that resonated against the storm outside, sealing them into a fragile bubble of warmth. Yet the storm's fury pressed against the windows like an uninvited sentinel, reminding him that safety was temporary, fragile, and relative. The heater hissed, expelling a flow of warmth that wrapped around them, but Ayla remained rigid, shivering, her hands pressed tightly against her belly, as if to physically shield herself from both the cold and the threat lurking just beyond the windshield. Her breaths came fast, uneven, each inhale a visible plume against the frosted glass, and Raphael could see the flicker of exhaustion, of fear, of relentless anxiety etched into the lines of her face, as if the storm outside mirrored the chaos within her. He released her arm slowly, careful not to startle her, and let his hands hover, fingertips just brushing the air near her shoulders, ready to react at the smallest movement. She flinched again, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make Raphael's chest tighten. The quiet between them was thick with unspoken truths, with the gravity of the past year that neither dared yet to speak, yet he could feel it pressing down, tangible and heavy. Outside, the blizzard screamed, snow slapping the car windows, wind rattling the frame, making every shadow beyond the glass a potential enemy. His eyes darted to each flicker of movement, each hint of presence in the whitened night, and he realized that the world had not gone quiet while they had been apart. It had only grown more dangerous. "Rafa," she whispered again, voice barely a tremor, the word itself laden with relief and fear and something he didn't yet recognize, a plea wrapped in layers of hesitation. He leaned closer slightly, careful not to crowd her, and let his gaze lock with hers, communicating the promise that she was not alone, that he would not let the storm or its hunters touch her. Yet even as he reassured her with the mere steel in his eyes, the tension in her muscles refused to ease. She was alert, calculating, bracing for a threat he could not yet name. The car's interior, warm though it was, felt insufficient against the mental and physical exhaustion etched into her every movement. Her hand stayed firm over her stomach, tightening as though the life inside demanded protection she couldn't fully articulate. Raphael wanted to speak, to ask the questions that were clawing at him, to demand explanations, to fill the yawning chasm of silence between them. But he sensed immediately that any words could shatter the fragile balance holding her together. Her breath hitched as her eyes flicked toward the side mirror, toward shadows beyond the snow, and Raphael followed the line of her gaze. He saw nothing, at first, but then he caught a fleeting movement, subtle, deliberate, enough to prick his instincts with the sharp edge of danger. His pulse spiked, awareness heightening, every sense screaming that the storm was not merely weather. It was a cover, a curtain hiding intentions far darker than frost and snow. Ayla's lips quivered, her eyes darting with urgent calculation, and he felt the familiar tug of helplessness as he realized he could protect her, but only if he could anticipate threats she had spent months hiding from him. She shifted slightly in her seat, rocking minutely, as if the car itself were unstable, yet he knew the tremors were entirely hers, born of fear and anticipation and the unrelenting weight of secrets carried alone. He reached out, a hand hovering just above hers again, a silent offer, an unspoken contract. "Trust me." But she did not take it immediately. Her gaze met his for a heartbeat, a clash of understanding and defiance, and then darted back to the windshield as if the world outside demanded every ounce of her vigilance. Raphael leaned back slightly, scanning the street through the frost-smeared glass, and then across the lane where shadows pooled, where the blizzard painted deceptive shapes, where he could almost feel someone's eyes boring into them from a distance. The air inside the car vibrated with tension, unbroken by conversation, punctuated only by the intermittent roar of wind and the hiss of the heater fighting the cold. He wanted to break it, to speak, to move, to do something tangible to claim control over a world that had become frighteningly unpredictable. But he held his tongue, knowing that a single wrong word, a single sudden movement could shatter her fragile composure. A shiver ran down her spine, and Rafael instinctively adjusted his posture to shield her further, even though he knew the barrier was more psychological than physical. She inhaled sharply, a sound he would remember, a mixture of pain, fear, and stubborn survival. "Rafa," she whispered once more, and this time the word carried the weight of months of absence, of unspoken terror, of hidden truths. Her eyes glistened with moisture, reflecting the streetlights flickering through the snow. Raphael's mind raced, calculating possibilities, scanning for threats, assessing the storm as if every snowflake could be a warning. He noticed the tension in her shoulders, in her neck, in the small flecks of her fingers against her belly, and it stoked a fire in him he had long thought extinguished. Protect at all costs. Yet even with all his training, all his instincts, all his empire of control, he could not predict what lay in the storm outside. The car rocked slightly as wind gusted, and Raphael's eyes followed a flash in the mirror, a shadow moving too fast, too deliberate, and he felt the first true pulse of panic in the night. Ayla's hand tightened further over her stomach, and she swallowed audibly, a small sound that made him ache with helplessness. He gritted his teeth, jaw rigid, breath controlled, and leaned forward closer to her, to anchor her to reality, to him, to safety, if only for these moments. And yet the snow outside pressed in, threatening, relentless, a world of chaos seeking to touch them even through the thin walls of the car. She tried to speak, but her lips parted only to close again, caught in hesitation, fear, and the burden of what she had endured alone. Raphael's eyes narrowed, focusing, scanning, calculating, and then his heart skipped a beat. Movement in the trees lining the street, a fleeting, sinister form disappearing as quickly as it appeared. The car fell silent again, save for the storm and their breathing, and Raphael realized that whatever followed them had not revealed itself fully, had not committed, had only tested, and he knew with a sinking certainty that the night had not yet given up its trials. Ayla's gaze flickered between him and the shadows outside, and he knew she anticipated something he could not yet see, a danger cloaked in winter and waiting for a lapse in attention. He braced himself, hand hovering protectively, mind racing with strategies, with contingencies, with every instinct honed to survive the deadly and unpredictable. Her lips parted once more, and he caught a trembling exhale, a breath that contained fear, warning, and reluctant trust, all at once. Raphael tightened his grip on the seat beside him, preparing, ready for the unknown that was inching closer, deliberate, patient, and invisible. The car rocked with another gust, frost creeping along the edges of the windshield, distorting the view of the street, and he realized that every second outside this fragile shelter brought them closer to confrontation, to revelation, to danger. And as her eyes met his, again, full of silent pleading and unspoken secrets, he understood fully. Nothing would protect them if the storm outside wasn't just weather, but a mask for eyes watching, planning, waiting. He leaned back slightly, still close, still ready, sensing every nuance of movement, every shadow, every whisper of wind that could signal threat. And then, a sudden scrape against the street, sharp, metallic, deliberate, broke the rhythm of the storm, and Raphael's instincts screamed that someone real, was closing in on them. His pulse spiked. Ayla's eyes widened. The quiet between them shattered under the realization. The storm had not given them a choice. They were trapped, and what approached was no mere illusion. The scrape against the street had barely faded when Rafael slammed the car into gear, tires gripping the icy asphalt with a precision honed from years of survival, snow spraying behind them as he maneuvered through the swirling storm. But even as he accelerated, the sense of pursuit did not wane. Rather, it intensified, pressing against him like an invisible weight that refused to be shaken off. Ayla remained rigid beside him, hands tightening over her belly, knuckles whitening, her body shivering not just from the cold, but from the adrenaline and fear radiating in waves she couldn't suppress. The heater tried its best to fill the car with warmth, to chase away the biting chill, but it was useless against the storm outside and the storm inside her. Rafael's eyes flicked constantly to the rearview mirror, scanning for movement, searching for anything that would give away the shadow following them, and his jaw tightened each time he caught the faintest glint of headlights swerving through the snowy haze. He wanted to speak, to demand answers, to reclaim the year he had lost, but he restrained himself, knowing that forcing words from her now could shatter her composure completely. And yet, the silence was unbearable, thick with all the things she wasn't saying, with all the truths that hung between them like the storm pressing against the car windows. His hands clenched the wheel, knuckles pale, every nerve taut, body ready for a confrontation he could not yet see, but could feel in the pit of his stomach. "Ayla," he murmured, low, controlled, yet the tremor of frustration in his voice betrayed him. "You need to tell me." Her lips parted, quivering, as though she wanted to speak, to unload the weight she had carried alone, yet the words remained trapped, swallowed by fear, by habit, by the instinct to survive. Her eyes were wide, glistening with unshed tears, reflecting the flickering streetlights and the occasional flare of headlights behind them. And Rafael realized she was staring not at him, but at the dangers she expected to burst through any moment from the snow-laden streets. He could see the small tremors run through her body, the involuntary shiver that wasn't caused by cold alone, and it tore at him in a way no gunshot, no threat, no empire could ever match. "Who's the father?" he demanded finally, voice sharper this time, honed with an edge he did not even try to soften. The words hung in the car like an accusation and a plea at once. Ayla froze, completely, utterly, her body stiffening as if she had been struck, and in that pause, Rafael understood far more than any confession could have conveyed. The answer was heavy, dangerous, explosive. Her lips trembled, parting to speak, then shutting again, throat quivering with the weight of unsaid words, eyes glistening with the terror of consequences she feared more than any punishment he could meet. He watched her every micro-expression, felt the electric tension radiating from her, and realized that silence could carry more danger than any weapon, that what she refused to say could destroy them both if spoken wrong. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, and he felt a pang of helplessness he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years, the helplessness of watching someone he loved bear a burden too great to carry alone. Every instinct in his body screamed to pry, to demand, to force the truth into the open. But his mind reminded him of the fragility he was facing, the danger lurking not in words, but in those who might hear them, in shadows waiting for any misstep. Ayla's hand fluttered slightly, brushing her stomach in a gesture of protection, and Rafael's gaze followed it, feeling the weight of that secret pressing on him almost tangibly. The heater hissed, the snow rattled against the car, and yet the only sound he could focus on was the rhythm of her breathing. Uneven, hurried, like she was struggling to survive the next second. He leaned forward slightly, voice softening, trying to bridge the gap between urgency and understanding. "Ayla, I need you to trust me." Her lips parted again, forming words that never came, and he realized that she was wrestling with more than fear of discovery. She was wrestling with a lifetime of choices she had made alone, decisions that had kept them both alive until now. The car swerved slightly on an icy patch, but Rafael's control never faltered, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, scanning for movement, anticipating the next strike from whatever shadow haunted them. He felt the tension coil tighter around her, a spring ready to snap, and he knew that forcing her to speak could either liberate her or destroy them both in an instant. "Rafa, if I tell you, everything will get worse," she finally whispered, voice barely audible above the roar of the storm, a fragile confession, a warning, and a plea all at once. He stared at her, searching her eyes for any clue, for a hint of deception, for a sign that she was lying to protect him, to protect herself, or to protect the child. Before he could respond, before he could find the words to reassure or to demand, a dark car appeared in the rearview mirror, sliding through the storm as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. The headlights glimmered through the swirling snow, low and deliberate, following them with a predatory patience that sent a jolt of fear through Rafael's spine. He felt the pulse of danger, sharp and immediate, threatening to shatter the fragile bubble of warmth and safety inside the car. Ayla stiffened even further, pressing her belly instinctively, eyes wide, scanning the dark vehicle with a knowledge he did not yet possess. He realized then, with sudden clarity, that she had known this pursuit was coming, that she had been running from more than the storm, more than shadows, more than the isolation of exile. He could almost hear the silent calculations in her mind, weighing risk against survival, weighing trust against instinct, balancing fear against the need to protect the life she carried. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, nails biting into leather, heart pounding, as the distance between their car and the one behind them closed ever so slightly with each passing second. The storm outside had become a curtain, concealing intent, and Rafael could feel the eyes watching them, calculating, waiting for the precise moment to strike, to test, to end. He swallowed hard, aware that he was no longer merely racing against snow and ice, but against a life-or-death game he had not yet fully understood. Ayla's breaths came in rapid, shallow bursts, and he could see the effort it took for her to maintain composure, the fight raging silently within her, and he realized that every second of hesitation could cost them everything. He leaned closer, voice low, careful. "Stay calm. Trust me, I'm here." She looked at him, pupils wide, flickering between terror and reluctant acknowledgement, and he sensed her struggle to decide whether to reveal what she carried inside her, the secret that had shaped her year of solitude. Another movement in the rearview mirror, slight, almost imperceptible, made Rafael's muscles tighten, his senses screaming that whoever followed them was experienced, patient, and deadly. The darkness seemed alive, coiling around their car, pressing closer with each heartbeat, and he could almost hear it whispering threats in a language only fear could translate. Ayla's hand shifted slightly, trembling against her belly, and Rafael reached over instinctively, brushing it with his own hand, offering silent assurance that he would not let them fall, even if he didn't yet understand the full danger. The dark car mirrored their every move, sliding through the snow with a patience that unnerved him, proving that this was not random, not chaotic, but deliberate, precise. A threat that had studied them, anticipated them, and chosen this moment to act. He adjusted speed, navigating icy patches, all while his eyes never left the shadow behind, every instinct screaming that revealing her secret now could tip the scales, that one wrong word could trigger consequences neither of them could survive. "Tell me," he breathed, softer now, less demanding, more commanding with unspoken authority. "I need to know everything. Now." Her lips trembled, parted, closed, parted again, and for a second, The weight of silence became unbearable, thick with tension, heavy with consequences, pressing on Rafael like snow-laden branches threatening to crush them. The storm outside seemed to roar louder, as if echoing the urgency, mirroring the threat lurking in the darkness, and he could feel it seep into the car, chilling the air, sharpening every sense. He realized the truth. Their enemy was not merely chasing them, it was testing them, provoking them, forcing the hidden into the open, and he was running out of time. Her voice came, fragmented, fragile. "Rafa, if I tell you—" The words hung, suspended, breaking only enough to send tremors through him, and the unspoken continuation trembled between them like a razor's edge. The dark car gained subtly, silently, a shadowed predator closing in, testing, assessing, waiting for the exact moment to strike, and Raphael's pulse surged as he understood the immediacy of the danger. He leaned forward slightly, hands firm on the wheel, eyes sharp as knives, yet aware that his every action had to balance protection, speed, and anticipation of the unknown. The heater hissed again, a futile comfort against the storm, the threat, the life pressed into her arms, and the perilous uncertainty looming behind them. Ayla's eyes flicked again to the rear view, pupils dilated, face pale, lips parted in silent warning, trembling under the weight of fear and responsibility, and Raphael felt every second stretch, taut, like a wire about to snap. He was aware that the secret she carried, the truth she had hidden for months, was as dangerous as the pursuit itself, that revealing it could bring annihilation, yet keeping it unspoken left them vulnerable in ways neither could measure. And then, the approaching vehicle shifted slightly, a glimmer of movement through the blizzard, and Raphael felt the undeniable surge of adrenaline, the first real taste of immediate confrontation, and the realization hit him with crushing force. The storm, the secret, the silence, and the shadows all converged in this single inevitable moment, and whatever came next, they would face together, whether ready or not. The dark car had vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, swallowed by the blizzard and the chaotic city streets, leaving Raphael's pulse still racing, hands gripping the steering wheel like iron as he processed the near encounter, every sense still attuned to movement, shadow, and danger. Ayla remained beside him, trembling, her body rigid and defensive, her hands pressed over her belly, fingers intertwining as if to physically bind herself to the life inside, as if that small connection could anchor her in a world gone suddenly perilous. Raphael started the engine, letting the vibrations soothe the tension in the car, yet he remained hyper-aware, scanning mirrors, side streets, and the flickers of movement that might betray pursuit. The storm was still fierce, snow swirling in frantic spirals outside, but inside, the quiet was nearly unbearable, filled with unspoken truths and fragile hesitation, the weight of a secret that had taken months to carry. Every line of Ayla's face reflected exhaustion, fear, and the kind of vigilance that comes from surviving threats unseen and unspoken. Raphael's gaze softened for a fraction, only to harden again as instinct took over. They were not safe, not for a moment, not in this city that hid hunters in every shadow. He finally spoke, low, deliberate, as if each word could serve as both command and reassurance. "Ayla, you need to tell me everything, right now." Her eyes flicked to his, wide and glistening, lips parting and shutting like fragile doors refusing to reveal what lay within. I can't," she whispered, voice breaking, quivering under the weight of months of fear and secrecy, and Raphael felt the sharp sting of frustration, helplessness, and longing collide in his chest. His hands flexed on the wheel, knuckles white, the urge to demand, to command, to extract the truth rising like a tidal wave he had never learned to restrain. But he hesitated, remembering the flinch, the tremor, the fragile life she protected with every muscle in her body. He drew a slow breath. voice softer now, but no less insistent. "If you don't tell me, Ayla, I can't protect you. I can't protect him." Her body shivered violently, and for a fleeting moment he thought the storm outside had broken her entirely, shaking her like fragile glass ready to shatter. Her eyes darted to the windshield, to every shadowed corner, to the dark streets they had just left, and he realized she was bracing not for him, but for the consequences of revealing what she had hidden for so long. The car seemed suddenly too small, too confined, filled with tension so thick it could be cut with a knife, every breath heavy with the weight of the unsaid, the unknown, the inevitable. "The baby is yours," she said finally, voice low, broken, fragile, and the words landed in Rafael's chest like a physical blow, spinning him off balance as if the world itself had tilted on its axis. He blinked, heart hammering, trying to comprehend, trying to process the magnitude of what she had just revealed, trying to reconcile the impossible truth with the months of absence, the year of silence. And then her voice continued, faltering, each word a shard of pain she carried alone. "I left because someone found out about us. They threatened to kill you if I stayed." Rage, disbelief, shock, and the sharp bite of betrayal surged through him, not at her, but at the world that had forced her into hiding, at the threats that had dictated their separation, at the knowledge that she had risked everything to survive, alone. His hands clenched, jaw tight, body rigid, and he demanded, voice shaking with a mixture of fury and hurt, "You didn't trust me to protect you?" She shook her head violently, tears spilling over, running freely down her pale cheeks, each one a testament to months of fear, isolation, and self-imposed sacrifice. "They weren't after me. They were after you," she confessed, voice trembling, fragile and full of the weight of what had haunted her every step. "And staying with you meant putting your life on a countdown." Her hands pressed against her face as she swallowed back sobs, breath shaking, the kind of trembling that comes not from cold, but from the emotional and physical exhaustion of carrying secrets too heavy to bear. "I couldn't let you die because of me," she admitted, whispering the truth that had cost her months of freedom, of normalcy, of love unspoken. Rafael's chest heaved, every heartbeat pounding against his ribs like a drum, his mind racing, calculating, consumed by a single relentless thought. He should have been there. He should have protected her. He should have prevented this nightmare. But before he could respond, before he could even take in the full breadth of her confession, the penthouse window shattered with a violent crash, glass exploding inward, shards spraying across the marble floors like lethal rain. The sound was deafening, a sudden jarring puncture to the fragile moment of revelation, and Rafael's body reacted instantly, moving with a speed honed by years of danger, training, and survival. He lunged toward Ayla, shielding her with a strength born from instinct and love, pulling her down low, feeling the heat of her body against his as adrenaline surged, cutting through fear and fatigue. Her screams pierced the air, sharp and terrified, echoing off the walls as Rafael pressed her to him, moving instinctively toward cover, toward safety, toward the center of the chaos that had invaded their home, their sanctuary. Bullets rattled against the walls, tearing through expensive furniture, shattering frames, and Rafael could feel the weight of the threat pressing on them, immediate and undeniable. His men erupted into action, shouting into radios, securing the perimeter, scanning for shooters, their movements sharp, precise. But Rafael's focus never left her, never left the space between them, never left the terrifying truth that someone had dared strike at them here. Ayla's sobs were muffled against his chest, her body shaking violently, and Rafael could feel the tension in every fiber of her being, the fear that they had barely escaped the storm outside now following them inside, infiltrating even the safety of their penthouse. He glanced at her, seeing not just fear, but regret, worry, exhaustion, and the unspoken knowledge that their lives had been forever changed by the choices they had made, by secrets kept, by survival alone. "I'm here," he murmured, voice low, steel and warmth interwoven, pressing her closer, willing her to feel protected even as the chaos unfolded around them. The shattering of glass echoed again in his mind, mingling with the hiss of the heater, the storm outside, and the adrenaline pumping through his veins, creating a symphony of danger and urgency that left no room for hesitation. He could see the tears, the trembling fingers clutching her stomach, the subtle shifts of weight as she instinctively sought protection, and his resolve hardened. Nothing. No bullet, no shadow, no enemy would touch her if he could prevent it. Every breath he drew was measured, every movement precise, every glance scanning for the source of the attack, the trajectory, the intent. And yet, even in the midst of danger, the revelation she had just given him, the life they had created together, the sacrifice she had endured to keep him safe, pressed on him with a weight heavier than any threat, more dangerous than any bullet. He realized with sudden, piercing clarity that nothing in the world mattered more than her, than the child, than the fragile, imperiled connection that had survived months of fear, hiding, and relentless pursuit. The shattered window was only the beginning, only the opening act in a night that promised no reprieve, only escalation, and Rafael's instincts screamed that the enemy was close, precise, personal, and ruthless. His hand brushed hers instinctively, gripping with quiet assurance, a silent promise that he would not allow fear to dictate the rest of their lives. Outside the penthouse, alarms and shouts mingled with the storm, with the snow, with the unknown forces at work, and Rafael understood fully that this attack was no random act. It was a calculated strike aimed at unraveling the delicate thread of safety they had barely begun to weave. He pressed her further into the couch, scanning the shattered glass, the broken furniture, the signs of intrusion, every detail a clue, every shadow a potential threat. Ayla trembled, and he could feel her heartbeat through the thin fabric of her coat, erratic, terrified, yet resilient, a reflection of the life she carried within her. His mind raced through possibilities. Who had found out? How had they discovered her? And most importantly, why now? Why here? Why strike when the revelation of the child had been made? Each thought collided violently with the next, forming a torrent of strategy, instinct, and raw emotion, all focused on one objective: keep her safe. Another shot rang out, closer this time, ricocheting off a corner of the room, and Rafael felt the hairs on his neck rise, every sense alive, every instinct screaming action. He rose slightly, shielding her body with his own, and looked out the broken window, spotting fleeting shadows fleeing the rooftop opposite, vanishing into the darkness, leaving only the echo of their intent. He clenched his jaw, voice low but fierce. "Stay down! Don't move! I've got you!" Her hands clutched his sleeve instinctively, gripping for stability, for assurance, for the knowledge that despite the chaos, she was not alone. And in that instant, Rafael understood fully that the truth she had been hiding, the reason for her flight, the weight of her secret, was not just about survival. It was about love, sacrifice, and the lengths someone would go to protect the one they cherished. The realization cut through him, sharper than any bullet, hotter than any rage, and yet he allowed no hesitation, no pause, only decisive action, scanning, moving, calculating each threat, each angle, each potential point of vulnerability. And as another shadow darted across the terrace, a subtle, deliberate motion, Rafael's eyes narrowed, every muscle coiled, preparing for the confrontation that he knew was inevitable, while simultaneously holding on to her, anchoring her in the only place that mattered, beside him, alive, safe for this moment. And in that frozen, tense, chaos-filled moment, the fragile thread of trust between them solidified, forged in fire and danger, but fragile still, ready to shatter if mismanaged. And Rafael understood with lethal clarity. The storm was far from over. The enemy was still out there. And nothing, not fear, not silence, not revelation, would protect them if he faltered even once. The shattering of glass had barely echoed through the penthouse before Rafael's instincts kicked into overdrive, a surge of adrenaline sharp and immediate, propelling him forward in a blur of motion as he lunged for Ayla, his body shielding hers from every splintering shard that fell like lethal rain around them. Her sobs pressed into his chest, fragile and piercing, muffled by the desperate embrace of someone who had feared being alone for too long, someone who had survived months of evasion only to find herself in the epicenter of danger once again. Rafael's arms wrapped around her with controlled ferocity, lifting her from the floor in a seamless motion honed by years of preparation for moments like this, carrying her toward the deeper recesses of the penthouse where security measures ran thick and the familiar hum of surveillance gave the illusion of safety. Outside, the storm continued to rage, snow slamming against windows, wind tearing across terraces. But inside, another storm had erupted, one of fury, fear, and the terrifying knowledge that the threat they had just glimpsed was no random act. It was precise, intentional, personal. Rafael's eyes darted across the room, scanning every corner, every shadow, every angle where an intruder could have positioned themselves, and his hands flexed on Ayla's back, steady but ready, grounding her in a world that had abruptly become unsafe. Her hands trembled against him, gripping at the fabric of his coat, nails digging shallow lines into leather and warmth alike. A silent plea for protection, a testament to the helplessness she had carried silently for months. Her voice finally broke through, fractured and trembling, fragments of a warning struggling to escape. They followed me. They were watching. They said if I came back to you. The words were barely coherent, but they struck Rafael like a dagger, curling cold and sharp in his stomach as the realization took hold. The threat was not abstract. It was immediate, organized, methodical, and terrifyingly close. He tightened his hold, whispering fiercely, "No one will touch you, Ayla. Not tonight, not ever." But even as the words left his lips, he knew that reassurance alone would not quell the storm surrounding them. His boots struck the polished floors with authority as he maneuvered through the maze of corridors, leading her deeper into the heart of the penthouse's secure safe rooms, areas layered with reinforced steel and the kind of security protocols designed for emergencies like this. But even these measures could not suppress the edge of fear that vibrated through the air, that rattled every nerve. Her eyes flickered to the walls, the cameras, the doors, tracking every possible exit, every possible point of intrusion, while Rafael's mind calculated the possibilities, running scenarios faster than thought itself could form them, each more dangerous than the last. "Lock every entrance," he barked into his radio, voice low but commanding, slicing through the panic in the air like a blade. "Deploy teams to all streets around. No one moves without my order. Find the shooter, now." The voices on the other end moved with precision, the chaos outside and within the penthouse, melding into a synchronized ballet of trained reactions. But Rafael's focus never wavered from Ayla, from the fragile life she carried against her chest, from the storm that would not be denied. She tried again to speak, breath coming in ragged, uneven bursts, words breaking against panic. I knew this would happen. That's why I left. I thought if I stayed, it would all end differently." Her confession, quiet and shaking, cut through Rafael with the intensity of a blade. Every syllable was weighted with months of fear, of survival, of sacrifice, of love unspoken and deferred, and yet it carried a truth he had been blind to for too long. The woman he loved had not abandoned him. She had been waging her own war, navigating threats he had refused to acknowledge, keeping him alive without his knowledge, without the comfort of shared struggle, without the relief of trust fully earned. Rage and sorrow collided in Rafael's chest, a conflagration of emotion that rendered him momentarily still, frozen by the depth of her endurance and the gravity of her secrecy. And then a voice, urgent, sharp, burst into the room as one of his men, face pale, eyes wide, rushed in, delivering news that twisted Rafael's stomach into knots. "Boss, the shooter left a message. It's about her." Time seemed to slow, the words hanging in the air like a noose ready to tighten, and Rafael's head snapped toward the man, every fiber of his being alert, every instinct screaming, his heart hammering with the dual force of rage and dread. "What? What does it say?" he demanded, voice low but cutting, every word deliberate, each one a probe into the immediate threat that now had a name and intent, and a message meant to terrify. The man's lips quivered slightly, hands shaking as he handed over a small, sleek device, the modern equivalent of a threat carved in binary and blood. Rafael snatched it with controlled fury, eyes narrowing as he scanned the text, each word a jagged stone in his chest, a challenge thrown with precision and malice. "If you don't give her up, the next shot won't miss." His blood ran cold, rage and protective instinct colliding into a potent force that made him nearly tremble with power restrained. Ayla's eyes widened, pupils dilated, the color draining from her face as the realization sank in. The threat was not idle. It was deliberate, intelligent, focused on her, on the life she carried, on the very heart of their fragile reunion. Rafael's mind shifted instantly, mapping every possible strategy, recalling every alley, every surveillance camera, every man who owed him loyalty, every escape route, every contingency, all in the span of a heartbeat. His grip on Ayla tightened, not to harm, but to anchor, to ground, to make tangible the promise that nothing would touch her if he could prevent it. She pressed herself closer, trembling, and Rafael could feel the rhythm of her panic, a rapid pulse against his chest, echoing the urgency of his own racing heartbeat. The threat outside, the storm, the chaos in the penthouse, all of it faded into a single, crystallized focus. Protect her. Understand the enemy, neutralize the danger, survive the night intact. Yet even as he mentally prepared for countermeasures, Ayla's voice, small and fragile, broke through the haze of adrenaline, a whisper trembling with terror. I thought I could reach you safely, but they tracked me anyway. They never wanted me to reach you." The words were a hammer on his skull, a revelation that chilled him deeper than the icy winter outside. Every instinct flared, rage, protectiveness, fear, calculation, and Rafael realized fully, unequivocally, that the enemy they faced was not opportunistic or random. It was relentless, patient, strategic, and intimately aware of every step she had taken, every risk she had endured. He pressed a kiss to her temple, fleeting but desperate, an anchor amidst the storm, while simultaneously scanning the cameras, the corridors, the entrances, the security feeds, all while plotting immediate retaliation. Every man under his command was moving as he had instructed, but Rafael understood that tonight, precision and speed would not be enough. Anticipation, ruthlessness, and absolute focus were required. And then, as if to punctuate the tension, another subtle movement caught his eye on the far terrace, a shadow shifting, deliberate, patient. He froze, eyes locking on it, heartbeat hammering, and for the first time in months, a shiver of real fear traced its way down his spine, not for himself, but for her, for the fragile life she carried, for the future he had only just begun to grasp. He whispered again, low, steady, a vow and a command intertwined. Stay close. Don't breathe if you can help it. I've got this. But deep down, he knew that the night was far from over, that the enemy had planned further, that the message, the attack, and the shadows were only the beginning of a war that had been silently waged for months, and now he would see it through, no matter the cost. 6. The moment the guard's voice barely left his mouth, the warning still hanging in the air like smoke after a gunshot, Ayla's body convulsed, her gasp sharp and jagged as if the very air had been stolen from her lungs, and she folded forward, an involuntary collapse that sent a shiver of panic racing down Rafael's spine, one he had never felt even in the heat of a firefight. Her hands shot instinctively to the top of her swollen belly, clutching it with white-knuckled desperation, pain rippling through her frame like a live current, like lightning striking in staccato bursts that left Rafael's heart hammering in tandem. Every instinct in his body screamed, every ounce of his being coiled tight with raw, protective fury as he caught her mid-fall, the force of her weakness pressing against him, grounding him, igniting a fear so primal it cut through the haze of adrenaline and rage he had carried since the attack. Her breath came in shattered fragments, fast and ragged, staccato gasps that tore at Rafael like claws, each inhale a reminder of the fragile life she carried and the threat that now lurked invisibly beyond the walls of their temporary sanctuary. "Rafa? Something's wrong? Please," she choked out, voice breaking, trembling on the edge of terror, and Rafael's heart clenched in response, muscles tightening with a combination of fear and fury that left him almost trembling under the weight of urgency. Her skin had lost all its color, drained to a ghostly pallor, sweat beading across her temple and upper lip, despite the cold that should have numbed her, each droplet a testament to the severity of whatever storm had suddenly overtaken her body. Without hesitation, Rafael lifted her completely into his arms, the familiar surge of power and protection coiling through him, and he ran, every step calculated yet frenzied, down the corridor of the penthouse, shouting into radios and to his men with a voice sharp and commanding, "Move! Clear the way! Get the car ready!" The hallways blurred past him as the sound of boots pounded behind them, the panic in his men's voices interwoven with the mechanical precision of trained soldiers executing orders under duress, each one aware that the stakes had escalated beyond simple protection into the realm of life and death immediacy. Her grip on his jacket tightened, fingers curling with the desperation of someone clinging to survival itself, and Rafael could feel the tremors running through her body, violent and uncontrolled, as if the pain threatened to fracture her entirely. The car waited outside, engines running, tires spinning slightly on the ice-crusted driveway, but Rafael barely paused, scanning the street for threats, for shadows, for the invisible enemy that had followed them this far, his mind operating in split-second calculations, escape route, hospital entry, perimeter security, the path that would keep her and their unborn child safe from whatever malevolence had pursued her. Every thought was a weapon, every muscle coiled like steel, yet his eyes never left her face, cataloging the fear, the agony, the vulnerability, the silent screams that played behind her eyes. The drive to the hospital was a blur of motion, every streetlight and shadowed alley slicing past in rapid succession, snow slapping against the windshield, the heater blasting warmth that barely penetrated the tension coiling around them, while Rafael's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as he fought to keep his mind focused and his reactions instantaneous. Ayla pressed herself against him, hands clutching at his shoulders, murmuring fragmented pleas and warnings, her voice barely audible over the roar of the engine and the storm outside, yet every word etched itself into Rafael's memory with urgent clarity. They can't reach me. They'll... Her sentences trailed off into pained whimpers, and Raphael's chest constricted with helplessness and anger, a tidal wave of protectiveness threatening to engulf him entirely. At the hospital entrance, he refused to release her hand, pulling her from the car and storming through the sliding doors, with a force that made security officers momentarily hesitate, understanding that resistance was futile against the intensity in his eyes. Nurses moved toward them, ready to intervene, but Raphael's voice, low and dangerous, cut through the sterile air. "Do not touch her. Step aside now." Even as medical staff attempted to assert protocol, he held her as if she were the most precious and fragile object in existence. The very core of his world narrowed to the small, trembling form in his arms. Every step down the sterile hallways amplified the sound of his boots, echoing through the corridors like the heartbeat of a predator and protector combined, while Ayla's rapid, shallow breaths hitched against his chest, a symphony of panic and vulnerability that pulled at something deep inside him. He paced outside the emergency room like a caged animal, cursing silently, grinding teeth together, fists clenched, rage, fear, and helplessness slicing through him with every second that passed. The minutes stretched into hours, the sterile lights of the hospital cold and unforgiving, each tick of the clock hammering the urgency of her condition into him. He refused to sit, refused to let his mind slow, scanning the doors, the hallways, the security cameras, replaying every step, every action, every detail, analyzing threats, preempting danger, mentally preparing for every eventuality that could emerge while she was inside. When the doctor finally emerged, calm but serious, Raphael's stomach twisted, heart skipping violently at the sight of the measured expression. "She's stable," the doctor said, words precise but heavy. "But her body is under severe stress. Whatever she's facing, it's pushing her to the edge." Raphael's breath left him in a violent gust, as if punched from within, the weight of relief and fear colliding into a force that left him momentarily winded, yet unbroken in resolve. But before he could even respond, before he could demand details, before he could brace for the worst, the doctor leaned in, voice dropping to a low, confidential whisper. "We also found something else, something she hid from you." Raphael's eyes narrowed instantly, every muscle tensing, adrenaline spiking again, a rush of dread and anticipation washing over him, as he realized that the storm had only begun, that the secrets she carried were more dangerous than any enemy outside, and that the next revelation could change everything. Ayla's hand, still trembling, pressed weakly against her belly, and Raphael's heart thudded violently at the weight of her silence, the fragility of her body, the unknown danger she had been shielding him from, the life at stake, and he understood with bone-deep clarity that the night was far from over, that her endurance had reached its limit, that whatever came next would test every ounce of his strength, every instinct honed through violence and power, and every shred of trust and love he had left. His mind raced, threats calculating, contingencies plotting, every possibility examined in rapid, brutal clarity, while her shallow breaths hitched like tiny, fragile waves against the chaotic undercurrent of fear surrounding them. And in that frozen, tense hallway, Raphael realized that her body's failure was only the first signal of something far larger, far more complex, far more dangerous, and that what she had been hiding from him was not just a secret, but a potential rupture in the fragile balance of survival they had been clinging to. Every instinct screamed, every fiber of his being sharpened, every heartbeat a drum, signaling impending crisis, and Raphael understood with an unshakable certainty. The truth she had protected, the threat she had evaded, and the fragile life she carried were all on the knife's edge of danger, and tonight they would either survive together or be shattered completely. Rafael didn't sit in the sterile hospital room immediately after the doctor's words. Instead, he remained standing for a long, unbearable moment, hands clenched at his sides, eyes fixed on Ayla's fragile, resting form, the steady beep of the monitors syncing with the rapid thrum of his pulse, each note a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. Then, exhaustion broke through the armor he had built over years, and he collapsed into the chair beside her bed, elbows digging into knees, hands covering his face as if doing so could shield him from the weight of the night, from the years of fear, from the fury and helplessness that clawed at him with every heartbeat. Hours had passed since they had arrived, since the storm had followed them into the hospital, and now, in the cold fluorescent light, Rafael finally felt the cracks in the steel facade he had worn for so long. Every line in his face, usually unreadable, carved by discipline and cruelty, now reflected exhaustion, terror, and grief, exposing a vulnerability so raw it left Ayla staring in silent disbelief. She had loved a man who seemed untouchable, unfeeling, untamed, and yet now she saw what she had never seen before. Not a mafia boss, not a ruler of shadows and fear, but a human being stripped bare, asked to survive pain he had never been prepared to understand, loss he had never deserved, and secrets he had never been allowed to unravel. For the first time, Ayla realized the cost of keeping herself hidden for so long, not just for herself, but for him, for the life they were creating together, for the trust that had been fractured by necessity, by fear, by the cruel circumstances surrounding them. Rafael's chest heaved as he lowered his hands slowly, finally lifting his head to meet her gaze, eyes glistening with vulnerability, dark and dangerous but raw, unshielded, and in that instant Ayla's heart constricted painfully. The man she had loved and feared in equal measure now sat before her, human, fallible, trembling under the weight of emotion he had never allowed himself to feel publicly. His voice, low, shaken, fractured with emotion, broke the silence first. "You should have told me everything." Each word was deliberate enough to carry both accusation and confession, a mixture of pain and longing that reverberated across the room. "I could have protected you. I could have protected our child." Tears gathered in Ayla's eyes, threatening to spill as she tried to speak, voice barely a whisper as if fragile air could shatter under the weight of her own guilt and relief. "I didn't want my love to be the reason you died," she admitted, every syllable saturated with fear and sorrow, a confession that had been months in the making, a truth too heavy to hold silently any longer. Rafael leaned forward instinctively, pressing her trembling hand to his chest, an unspoken vow and claim, an anchor against the chaos that had defined their night and the past year. His words followed immediately, imbued with fierce, raw determination. "You're not walking out of my life again. Not you, not our baby, not after the hell we've already survived." Silence fell over them, heavier than any fear, wrapping the room in a suffocating cocoon of intimacy, grief, and unspoken promises. The only sound the rhythmic pulse of the monitors and the faint hum of the hospital ventilation. Every second stretched long, heavy with shared understanding, each heartbeat sinking between them in a silent acknowledgement that their survival was a temporary reprieve, not a guarantee, and that the outside world with its shadows and threats still waited with patient malice. Then, sharp and sudden, Rafael's phone buzzed against the small table beside him, its vibration slicing through the fragile quiet like a blade, a reminder that danger was never far, that the world outside had not paused for their reunion, and that the fragile peace they had found in this room was as fleeting as the snowstorm that had chased them from the streets. He glanced at the screen, fingers tightening around the device as his eyes hardened, muscles tensing. the familiar aura of lethal focus returning with brutal swiftness. The message was chilling in its simplicity, finality imbued in its few words. If you don't give her up, the next shot won't miss. Rafael's chest constricted, anger and protective instinct colliding in a violent storm inside him. Yet a cool, calculated clarity followed almost instantly, his mind already mapping contingencies, potential threats, and the ruthless steps required to eliminate them. Ayla shifted slightly, sensing the change in his demeanor, fear and awe mingling in her eyes as she recognized the transformation from exhausted vulnerability to lethal resolve, a shift that spoke of the man who had survived every attempt on his life, every betrayal, every war, every nightmare he had endured, and now every enemy that dared threaten her would find the same unyielding force. He pressed a hand against her cheek, forcing her gaze to meet his, letting her see the storm behind his eyes, the promise unspoken but ironclad. No one, nothing, would take her from him. "You're mine," he said quietly, the words carrying the weight of every threat survived, every secret endured, every love withheld and finally claimed, and Ayla's breath caught, a mixture of relief and terror locking her chest. He rose, chair scraping lightly against the floor, movements deliberate, controlled, predatory even, yet tempered with care, ensuring her fragile form was never threatened again, his mind already orchestrating every possible move to secure their safety, every contingency to preempt the threat looming beyond the hospital walls. Rafael's gaze swept the room, every corner, every exit, calculating routes, exit strategies, surveillance options, every ally he could call upon. And yet he remained tethered to her, never letting her go, every instinct sharpened to protect the life at his chest. Her hand remained pressed to his chest, small, warm, fragile, the anchor to his humanity amidst the surge of cold logic and fury he now radiated, a physical reminder of why he could not, would not falter. Time slowed again as he contemplated the message, the implied threat, the calculated malice that had followed them here. Yet for the first time, he felt an unshakable certainty. She would not be given up, not for money, not for leverage, not for fear. Each breath, each heartbeat, each moment between them reinforced the promise that he would endure every threat, fight every shadow, and survive every enemy for her, for their child, for the life they had reclaimed. And yet, the finality of the message, the lethal simplicity of its warning, gnawed at the edges of his calculated resolve, reminding him that the world outside was relentless, patient, and cruel, that the night was far from over, and that their reunion, no matter how hard won, was only the beginning of the trials that fate had yet to throw in their path. Rafael's eyes softened momentarily as he studied her face, tracing the delicate lines, the exhaustion, the vulnerability, the life she carried, and he pressed a kiss to her temple, a grounding, intimate act in the storm of danger and emotion, a promise made silently, irrevocably, that no threat would sever them again. And in that shared breath, in the quiet that followed, the hospital room held a fragile equilibrium, a balance between relief and fear, love and danger, exhaustion and vigilance, until Rafael's gaze shifted once more to the phone, reading the chilling words again, and he understood fully that to protect them, he would have to embrace every part of himself: the lover, the father, the warrior, the survivor, the Mafia boss, and the man who had finally, painfully, allowed himself to break. He stood solid and unyielding, a force coiled and ready, every muscle, every thought, every instinct focused on ensuring that neither Ayla nor their child would ever face the world's malice alone. And as he turned to look at her, hand still pressed against his chest, eyes meeting hers with silent ferocity, he whispered, almost more to himself than to her, They can try, but they will never succeed. Not you, not our baby, not now, not ever. The storm outside seemed to pause, the hum of machines softening, the night holding its breath with them, and for the first time, Rafael allowed himself a single thought. No matter what came next, they had survived the worst together, and they would face the future as one, unbreakable, untouchable, bound by love, fury, and the unyielding promise of survival. And yet, even as he swore that oath, even as he pressed his hand to hers, even as the world around them fell into a fragile hush, the phone buzzed again, a reminder that peace was temporary, danger was persistent, and that the final battle, for their lives, their love, their future, was only just beginning. The screen glowed with a single, simple, terrifyingly precise message, and Raphael's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing into the dangerous, predatory focus that had kept him alive for decades. We'll be watching, always. And in that instant, the story of survival, love, and fury, the story of Rafael and Ayla, reached a moment of tense, unshakable equilibrium, poised between triumph and the shadow of looming threat, their hearts beating together steady and fierce in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it as one, unyielding and unbroken. And that's the end of today's story, a tale of love, fear, and the unbreakable bonds that survive even the darkest storms. If this touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and comment. I'd love to hear how it made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story that moves you. Until next time, remember, every heart has a story waiting to be woven.